So as a YouTuber, I have this great privilege of testing the latest technologies before they come to market. So I was especially excited to receive one of these latest batteries for the home that can earn money without needing to be connected to a solar panel. And straight to the point, it does this by buying in energy automatically when it's cheap at night, and then to sell it back to the grid at peak times when everyone needs it. And so essentially it's acting like an automated energy stock exchange. On top of that though, these units could potentially save our outdated grid that we have here in the UK. By having lots of battery storage linked to the grid in lots of homes locally, that means energy that's been gathered by renewable means can be stored and used when needed, not just when it's sunny. Because let's face it, this is the UK, famous for its cloudy weather, and more to the point, has an incredibly wise government that thought it would be a great idea to block out the sun using geoengineering, no longer a conspiracy theory, at the sum of £50 million from the taxpayer. Let me think on that for a while. So I guess the main question is, despite having a 15-year warranty, which these guys do, can we get a return on our investment? Or does this technology pose more risks than benefits? Firstly, let me take you outside and we'll assemble it together. Right, before I slot this on, I'll show you the back of it. These are your connections to the grid in here. We've also got a SIM card slot so we can operate this via 4G. There's the EMS and the LAN there. We've got some very large heat sinks for the inverter, and your solar panels will click into this side, and you've got main isolation switches. And obviously being modular, these just simply slot together there. With just a couple of bolts at the bottom. There we are, it's done. So the only thing we need to do at this point is probably bolt it to the floor, bolt it to the wall, and then I'll have an installer come and link this to the grid for me. So this system isn't going to remain here, but it will be outside. But essentially I'm building an off-grid house. But anyway, this will be part of that project. But there is a reason why you'd want to have this outside as opposed to inside. So there are new regulations around having lithium batteries in your home. The preference is to have it outside so you can have proper fire safety. So now all of these units must be completely waterproof. Now you might be thinking, surely it's not a good idea to have batteries outside because of the frost. Frost affects batteries, and you'd be correct. So these systems now have an inbuilt heating system to make sure that the batteries are kept at an optimum temperature. My initial thoughts on that is it's obviously going to use some energy just to keep the batteries warm. So maybe it is a good idea to have some sort of surrounding just to retain some of that heat. And on the same subject, it's got fire suppression technology that complies with all the latest regulations. Completely sealed, so it should cope with being outdoors just fine. But I'm going to be doing a long-term test with it. So SAJ is the company. The model of this is HS3. It's a 5 kilowatt hour unit, but with the modules, we can expand it to 40 kilowatts. So like the other batteries you've probably seen on this channel, this is an all-in-one unit. There's no other bits to go with it. It's a hybrid inverter with EMS and PCS. It's got an EV charger, it can take solar input, and it's a backup battery system. And in the event of a power cut, it just takes 10 milliseconds for that change to switch over. It's 97.6 efficiency rating, which is excellent. You don't want wasted energy. We have smart AI app controls. Debatable whether you want to trust that, but that's what this has. But for peace of mind, SAJ have been trading for over 20 years and have supplies in over 80 countries, so they're a pretty big deal. So I've just turned the system on and clicked start, and it's showing me I've got a 49% battery included. That's very kind of them. If you're not using batteries for a long time, around 50% is the ideal amount to leave in there, by the way. Now, this system has a warranty of 15 years. So if there are any problems, SAJ will replace the whole system. Now, I know you're interested. I'm certainly interested. So what are the costs of getting a system like this? And what kind of return do you get on your investment? All right, we're back inside. So how do we go about making money out of one of these? So for a start, you have to have these installed by a certified MCS installer. That's the Microgeneration Certification Scheme. You also need to notify and get the approval of your distribution network operator. You then need to register with an SEG. That means a Smart Export Guarantee Scheme. That can be a company like E.ON or Octopus Energy or British Gas, for example. You'll also need a smart meter. You actually get one with this system. There's also energy management that's been optimized with AI. So let's focus now upon energy costs. So electricity in the UK is around about 26 pence per kilowatt hour. And I think we pay something like 60% more on electricity than any other European country. I think that's mainly because we don't use our own coal supply anymore. And we're still heavily dependent on natural gas to generate power. And the biggest issue with cost is that we import a lot of it. So anything happening in the Middle East right now is always a fluctuating cost. So they just keep it at a high price to negate that risk. Now you'd think that the big push for renewables would lower the cost because that's like free energy like wind and solar. But apparently there's a whole myriad of issues with the grid and it being so expensive. One issue being the grid can't actually take on any more power in these high capacity times. And so the wind farms aren't actually connected to the grid, but we still have to pay them the potential energy. I heard someone say it's like having a shop selling products but with no roads going to it, and the customers still have to pay for what they could have bought. Basically, we're being taxed for something we don't actually make use of. Crazy. But here's the thing, in those peak times when everyone needs energy, you can actually sell energy to the grid from your home. Those prices range between 15 and 20 pence per kilowatt hour. But you can also buy energy when it's super cheap, when no one's using it. And the current buying in power is between 8 and 9 pence per kilowatt hour. So for example, if we buy in at 9 pence per kilowatt and we sell at 20 pence per kilowatt, well, we're making about 11 pence profit. Times that by a 5 kilowatt system, we've made 55 pence a day. But let's say we expanded to a 40 kilowatt system and we discharged all of that in a day. Well, then we've made £4.40. But continuing the thought experiment, let's say we were generating our own power for free, such as solar and maybe my wood gasifier. So we're making 20 pence per kilowatt. This is a 5 kilowatt system, so that's about £1. That is just for one discharge of a full battery. Now let's say, for instance, you bought about 10 kilowatts of solar panels. Well, on average per day, apparently you can make 25 kilowatts of energy. We sell that to the grid, we've made about £5. Now with my new gasifying generator with free waste material, I reckon we can do about the same, £5 worth of energy per day, but we can do it in winter time. But the thing is, that's only relative if you can sell it at the peak times. So between 7 and 10 in the morning and 4 and 7 p.m. at night. So when you hear those figures, it doesn't sound like a lot of money, does it? So if we look at it now that these systems last 15 years, let's see how much money we've made. So with a 5 kilowatt system, let's say we're realistically selling energy for about £1 a day. Over 15 years, that's £5,475. However, if we've got a 40 kilowatt system, comfortably selling at £5 per day, then we've made £27,375, which is a bit more promising. Would that then pay for a 40 kilowatt system? The cost of these is entirely dependent on the installer. They buy these kits wholesale and then they'll add a margin for the installation. But what you're asking of an installer is you're getting his certification and the liability of taking on one of these projects. And that cost is going to be relative to the installer. This, unfortunately, is not a DIY job. Right, so I've been out and I've done some more digging and research. I actually had a meeting with my installer about the matter. And depending on your installer, a 5 kilowatt hour system like this can cost between 5 and 8 grand. But that's relative to the old systems that are currently available. These new ones that are modular and a lot quicker to put together. But for any kind of return on your investment, you first need a quote that is as low as you can get it and have some sort of guarantee from an SEG on how much you can sell that energy for. And only then can you calculate what the actual savings or profits are going to be. So let's just assume there's no financial gain from having a battery system. Why would we want to have one anyway? Well, I think a genuinely good reason is for the national blackouts that potentially could be coming. Now, yes, you could consider that as scaremongering in order to get into buying a battery. But if you look at the way things are managed in this country, I think that's actually plausible. So really, you should justify the costs by considering if you have it and you don't need it, then fine. But if you need it and you don't have it, are you going to be okay? Say, for example, you've got a medical dialysis machine that you're reliant on, or you've got a crypto mining kind of operation going on. You could be heavily invested in data processing, or you've been farming and you want to make sure everything in your freezers doesn't spoil for the year. Those are some typical categories where you'll definitely want a backup system. But let's say if it's not a big deal, then maybe you can just get away with some storm lanterns and a wind-up phone charger. But something that did come out in the conversations that I had were being connected to the grid with solar panels. So anyone with solar panels will tell you, you just can't get them to sustain that energy all year round. There are several months of the year where you've just got no electricity. So even though they're saving you money during the summer months, you still need to have something like being connected to the grid or have a generator in the winter months. Now, if you've got your own hydro turbine, that's fantastic. But if you want to be off grid, then you'll need to use a diesel generator. And if that's the case, then you'll be spending about 4 times more than what you'd be paying via the grid, which of course will negate any savings that you've been collecting in summer. Now, I've got some figures here. A diesel, which is currently £1.45 a litre here in the UK, and this is accounting for the efficiency of the diesel generator, will produce between 65 pence and 70 pence per kilowatt hour. Now, red diesel apparently is just £1 per litre. That is 47 pence to 52 pence per kilowatt hour. But interestingly, I've been buying kerosene for 48 pence per litre. That's in July, the months where no one wants to buy kerosene. Kerosene is heating oil, by the way, for my home. Now, if you run that through a diesel generator, you do need to add a little bit of lubrication properties, like a bit of oil of some sort. But you can get between 25 pence and 30 pence per kilowatt hour, which is about the same as being on the grid. Now, the only problem with that is it's going to be noisy, so it's a good idea to just charge up batteries for about an hour in the morning with the diesel generator, such as this one maybe, and then you've got power all day and all night until the next morning, where you probably want to top it back up again. I apologise for the sound of the rain, it's making a right racket at the moment. But if I can summarise exactly how I feel about these battery systems, and I'm talking in general here, I haven't managed to test this out fully, so I can't give you my objective review on this yet. But really, I think you only need a battery if you're going to be vulnerable in the event of a power cut, or if you're just adamant to have independence from the grid, but you're not necessarily saving money. Now, it's quite possible that I'm wrong. I've tried to research into this as best as I can, but I'm really looking forward to your thoughts in the comment section. We're obviously going to be talking more on the subject when I build my new sustainable wood-fired gasification power station. I'm going to be installing a full roof of solar panels on my little dwelling I'm building. And so energy storage is going to be quite a big theme on this channel, along with laser welding and all the other likes. But until then, I hope that you can forge for yourself a life worth living. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.